She looked lost, but she was a wolf woman from another planet, and she chose me as her mate for life. The blizzard had swallowed the forest whole. In the high mountains of Montana, everything looked erased, like the world had been buried under white silence. The trees groaned under the snow. The wind howled like a warning no one was left to hear. But he was still there. Inside a weather-worn log cabin miles from the nearest road, Connor Hale, 27, ex-military, and now a temporary forest ranger, was checking the generator for the third time that day. Isolation didn't bother him. In fact, he wanted it. He wanted the cold, the quiet, the kind of silence where the past couldn't shout anymore. That was before she showed up. The first time he saw her, he thought she was a wolf. A white one, huge and still, standing on a ridge above the trees, staring right at him. But when he blinked, she was gone. He figured it was stress. Or maybe the cold was finally messing with his mind. The second time, she wasn't a wolf. She was standing in the middle of the snow-covered road, barefoot, skin pale as the snow, long hair whipping in the wind, golden eyes fixed on his. A woman. Almost. Something was wrong. Not in her beauty, that was undeniable, but in how still she was. She didn't shiver, didn't blink, didn't seem real. Connor slammed on the brakes. She didn't flinch. He got out, bundled in layers of insulated gear. The cold bit his face. As he stepped closer, he finally saw what his brain had been trying to ignore. Triangular ears on top of her head, barely hidden under the snow-damp hair, and a long white tail, swaying slightly behind her, poking from under a thin coat that didn't belong in this weather, or this planet. "You okay?" he asked, trying to figure out if this was some sort of prank, hallucination, or escapee from a sci-fi convention. She stared at him like she was scanning his soul. "I'm cold," she said in perfect English, but with an accent that didn't belong to any country on earth. He hesitated. Everything in him screamed, "Don't." But he didn't listen. She looked lost and alone, and something deep in him couldn't turn away. He took her back to the cabin, gave her tea, started the fire, offered clothes. She accepted everything in near silence, watching him with a quiet intensity, like she was memorizing his every move. "Do you have a name?" he asked. She stared into the flames, then finally said, "Kaylee." "That's beautiful. It's not a human name." I figured. That night, Connor couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw hers, glowing, golden, too aware. Somewhere inside, he already knew she wasn't just different. She was something else, something not from here. The storm got worse the next day. Radios were dead, roads blocked. Just him, her, and a world of white. Kaylee moved through the cabin like a wild creature, testing new territory. She sniffed objects, listened closely to the static on the radio, and ran her fingers over the wood of the walls like it had meaning. That night, as he folded a blanket, she looked at him and said, "Connor, your presence calms my core." "My what?" "Your frequency. It resonates with mine." "Is that a compliment?" She stepped closer. Her golden eyes shimmered. Her tail slowly curled around his leg. Not in aggression, but in something else. Something ancient. Something intimate. "I need to sleep near you. Just for tonight. I won't touch you." He froze. This some kind of custom? "No, it's bonding. If I sleep far from you now, I might not survive the cold. Or the silence." He didn't understand, but he let her curl up beside the bed, wrapped in furs like she belonged to the forest. In the middle of the night, he woke up. She had climbed into the bed beside him. Not touching, not sleeping, just watching him, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. And when she finally closed them, it was like she'd found something she hadn't had in a long, long time. Peace. Connor woke to the faint sound of crunching snow outside. It was early, maybe 5 a.m., and the light filtering through the frost-covered windows was still blue and cold. Kaylee was gone. The space beside him was warm, but empty. He sat up, blanket falling off his chest, and listened. Crunch, crunch, pause. He jumped out of bed, pulled on his boots and jacket, and opened the door. Kaylee stood barefoot in the snow, facing the tree-line. Her long white hair whipped behind her like a banner. The cold didn't seem to touch her. She was still, tense, focused. He stepped outside, the cold punching his lungs. "Kaylee." She didn't turn. "What the hell are you doing out here?" Then he heard it too. Something was moving through the trees. Not wind. Not an animal. Footsteps. Connor instinctively reached for the sidearm he kept in a lockbox by the front door, only to curse under his breath. He wasn't carrying just a radio and a flashlight. Kaylee suddenly crouched, her body low, her muscles twitching beneath the thin layer of clothing. "Get inside," she whispered. Not scared. Warning. Connor hesitated. She snapped her head toward him, eyes glowing brighter than before. "Now." He backed into the cabin. She followed, slow and alert. When the door shut, she turned to him, her voice flat. "They followed me." "Who?" "My kin." Connor frowned. "You mean your people?" She nodded. "They tracked my scent across the storm. I thought I had enough distance, but I was wrong. You told me you were alone. I was. Until I wasn't." Connor exhaled, rubbing his hands together. "What do they want?" Kaylee looked straight into him, not blinking. "To bring me back, or to destroy me." The words hung in the air like frost. He stared at her, at the calm in her voice, the way she didn't tremble, not from cold or fear. "You're serious." "I don't joke." He stepped back. This was spiraling fast. "So what are they? Like you? Wolf people?" She tilted her head. "No, I'm not like them. Not anymore." Her eyes softened for a second. "I bonded with you, Connor. That makes me a threat." He swallowed hard. "You said that word again. Bonded. What the hell does that mean?" Kaylee's voice dropped, quiet and solemn. "I shared rest with you. My body adjusted to your rhythm. My core recognized yours. That's a declaration of unity in my species. Permanent. Permanent," he repeated, like it was foreign. She nodded once. "From this point on, I am yours, and you are mine." He stared at her, heart pounding. "Kaylee, I didn't know. I didn't agree to that." "I know," she said gently, "but your body did, and I followed its call." That did not make him feel better. A silence passed between them, heavy, almost physical. Then a loud bang echoed through the trees outside. Connor's breath caught. Kaylee didn't flinch. Her ears twitched. She moved to the window, careful, silent. She was glowing faintly now, not visibly, but something about her presence seemed brighter, more dangerous. "They've breached the border," she said. "What border?" She looked over her shoulder. "The one I set, with scent and thought, to keep them out." Connor shook his head, stepping toward the radio. "I need backup. Rangers. Cops. Anyone. They won't help you." She interrupted. "Why not?" "Because they won't see them. And if they do, it'll be the last thing they see." Something shifted in her tone. Not anger. Regret. Connor dropped his hand from the radio. "Then what do we do?" Kaylee turned to face him fully now. The glow in her eyes was fierce. Her posture taller. Her tail curled with tension. "We hide. We survive. And if needed, we fight." Connor looked at her. This alien woman, half-wolf, fully unreal, standing in his cabin like she belonged here more than he ever had. He didn't understand half of what she was saying, but something in him believed every word, and that scared him. They moved quickly. Kaylee had him cover the windows with blackout cloth, taught him how to mask his scent with pine and ash, and insisted he stay close to her at all times. "You carry heat. Life. They can track that. How do you know they're not just here for you?" She looked at him, eyes sad. "Because I made you part of me. That makes you part of the threat." Connor didn't answer. His mind raced with questions, none of which had answers that made any sense. All he knew was he was now involved in something ancient, alien, and far beyond his understanding. That night, they didn't sleep. They sat near the fire, silent, listening to the wind and the distant sound of something moving. Always just at the edge of hearing. Always just beyond the tree lean. Kaylee eventually rested her head against his shoulder. He didn't stop her. "I didn't mean to do this to you," she said softly. He looked down at her. "But you did." She nodded. "I was tired of running, and you felt safe." He didn't respond, but he didn't move away either, because somewhere deep inside, under all the fear and doubt and impossible truths, he felt something too. Something ancient. Something dangerous. Something real. By the third day of isolation, the forest was no longer quiet. Connor could feel it in the way the cabin creaked, in the way the snow seemed watched, in the way Kaylee never fully closed her eyes anymore. "They're getting closer," she said. "How close?" She tilted her head, sniffing the air near the cracks in the door. "They're inside the valley now. Less than a mile." Connor's heart dropped. That wasn't out there. That was right here. He'd spent years surviving chaos, in combat, in loss, in silence. But this was unknown. No mission, no orders, just a primal instinct screaming, run. But he didn't. He looked at her, Kaylee, with her impossible golden eyes and the quiet power behind them, and something inside him refused to leave her. They want to extract me, she said quietly. I'm considered contaminated. Because of me? Yes. He laughed once, bitter sharp. Well, that's just great. She didn't respond. Instead, she walked to the window and placed both hands on the glass. Her breath fogged it lightly, and for the first time since she arrived, Connor noticed she was shaking. Just barely, but enough. They'll kill you, she said. Connor froze. If they get inside, she continued, they won't ask questions. They won't recognize you as anything but a threat. And once the bond is sealed, Kaylee turned to him, her expression unreadable. It's not complete yet. He stepped back a little. So what? You're saying I'm halfway turned into your mate or whatever. Halfway connected, she corrected. But that's the danger. You're not one of us. You're not protected. You try to breathe evenly, then break it. I can't or won't. Kaylee looked down. I made a choice. I knew what it meant, but I didn't know your world would respond like this. Connor stared at her, at the woman who had dropped into his life like a snowstorm, beautiful and wild and dragging death in her shadow. I didn't ask for this. I know. He felt the tension building in his chest like a dam about to break. Then give me a reason not to throw you out right now and call for help. She didn't blink, didn't cry, didn't plead. She simply said, because they're not coming for me anymore. They're coming for us. He stopped, completely still. They mark you, she said. The moment we shared rest. The moment you let me stay. You're not just involved anymore, Connor. You're claimed. And they smell it. That night, Connor checked every rifle in the cabin. There wasn't much. One hunting rifle, a shotgun with 2 shells, and an old flare gun. Not much against whatever was out there. Kaylee sat by the fire, silent, watching him move. Her tail was still now, her body curled like a cat ready to pounce. Guns won't stop them, she said. Then what will? Not being here. She stood, slowly. I can lead them away, give you time to escape. Once I cross the ridge, they'll follow me. Connor stared at her. You die. She looked away. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of what they'll do to you. The room went quiet again. The storm outside had slowed, but the pressure inside the cabin was rising like steam in a locked room. Connor crossed the space between them. No, we do this together. Kaylee looked up, surprised. I'm not letting you walk into the woods alone to be hunted like an animal. Not after all this. Her eyes searched his, as if looking for hesitation. She found none. Then we need to finish the bond. He blinked. What does that mean? She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. If we complete it, you'll be part of me. Enough that they'll see you as more than prey. They'll hesitate. That might be all we need. Connor looked into her eyes, glowing faintly again, but filled with something raw. Real. And what happens to me if we do this? You change, she whispered. Not like them. Not like me. But different. Stronger. Connected. He could feel the question clawing at the edge of his throat. Will I still be human? Her answer came after a long pause. You'll be ours. The wind picked up again. A low howl rolled across the snow like a warning drum. Connor's hand shook slightly as he loaded the flare gun. He turned to her. If we do this, I'm not doing it because I understand it. I'm doing it because I trust you. Kaylee nodded once. I'll make it painless. I doubt that, he muttered. She smiled. Close your eyes. He did. A breath. Then her hand on his chest. Warm and electric. Then the unmistakable sound of something ancient binding. His heart stuttered. His breath caught. A sharp flash of light behind his eyelids. And then silence. When he opened his eyes, the room was still. The fire burned low, but everything felt different. Kaylee's voice entered his mind before her lips moved. Now you're marked. He looked at his chest, a faint glow under the skin, like embers buried beneath flesh. Outside, the sound returned. But now it wasn't a threat. It was a summons. The silence didn't last. Less than an hour after the bond sealed, they came. It started with a vibration in the air, so low Connor could feel in his bones before he heard it. Kaylee stood by the window, eyes narrowed, tail flicking once, then still. "They're here," she said, barely above a whisper. Connor gripped the shotgun tighter, though part of him knew it was useless. The glow under his skin still pulsed faintly, like it was syncing with something outside. Something bigger. "How many?" he asked. Kaylee didn't answer. Then came the shadows. Figures moved through the tree lean, tall, graceful, and wrong. Not human. Not like Kaylee either. More feral. Their limbs moved with too much fluidity, their glowing eyes reflecting the firelight like predators. Connor counted 5, maybe 6. One paused right outside the cabin, sniffing the air. "They smell the bond," Kaylee said. "But they don't respect it. What happens if they come in?" Kaylee turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Then we run, or we burn." A deep, guttural howl split the air. It wasn't rage. It wasn't a threat. It was claim. Kaylee reacted instantly. "Down," she shouted. The front window exploded inward. Glass, snow, and went flying like shrapnel. A figure leapt through the frame, snarling, moving in a blur. Connor fired the shotgun by instinct. The blast lit the room for a split second. The thing screamed, high-pitched and alien, but didn't go down. Kaylee collided with it midair, both of them tumbling across the floor in a tangle of limbs and teeth. She moved faster than Connor had ever seen. Her body shifted slightly, just enough to show the strength beneath her disguise. She wasn't just a woman with ears and a tail. She was a weapon. Another creature lunged through the doorway. Connor raised a flare gun and fired. The flare hit the ceiling, burst in a bright, blinding red light. The heat and fire startled the attacker, sending it staggering back with a howl. "Now!" Kaylee shouted. "We run." Connor grabbed a pack by the door. Emergency supplies, water, matches. Kaylee shoved the back door open, snow pouring in like water from a broken dam. They ran. Into the dark. Into the blizzard. Into everything they didn't understand. They didn't stop until the forest swallowed them whole. Snow blinded every step, trees whipping past, branches clawing at their clothes. Connor's lungs burned. His legs felt like anchors. But Kaylee kept pulling him, guiding him with instincts no human could match. They stopped beneath a ridge, a hollow in the rock just deep enough to hide. Kaylee crouched beside him, breath steaming, her tail curling tightly around her legs. They won't follow this far. Not yet. Connor leaned against the stone wall, trying to process what just happened. "Why now?" he asked. "Why attack like that?" Kaylee's voice was tight, controlled, but shaking. "They want to see how far I go to protect you." They saw. Now they'll regroup. And next time, they won't hesitate. Connor turned to her, searching her face. "Are we going to make it out of this?" She didn't lie. "I don't know." That hit harder than he expected. They built a fire in the hollow, just enough to dry their clothes. Kaylee wrapped herself in the emergency blanket. Her skin was pale, glowing faintly. "Tired. You didn't have to come with me," she said quietly. Connor looked at her. "You didn't give me a choice. You bonded with me. I mean tonight, when we ran. You could have stayed." He scoffed. "And do what? Watch them tear you apart." Kaylee didn't smile, just stared into the fire. "I'm not what you think I am, Connor. Then tell me. Tell me everything." So she did. She spoke of her planet, cold and moonlit, with forests that whispered secrets and skies that never fully darkened. Of her people, the Ferali, born in shifting packs, ruled by instinct, blood, and hierarchy. She was bred to be alpha, stronger, faster, deadlier than the rest. But she was born wrong, empathetic, curious, drawn to life outside the pack. So she ran, found Earth by accident, and now her past had come for her. "You're not just running," Connor said. "You're rebelling." Kaylee looked up. No one's ever said that out loud before. Connor leaned back against the stone. His hand was shaking, from cold, or fear, or adrenaline. He didn't know. "You chose me." "Yes." "What?" Her eyes searched his. "Because you didn't run from me. You didn't ask what I was. You just offered warmth. And I hadn't felt safe in years." The fire crackled. Snow drifted sideways across the mouth of the cave. Connor looked at her, this alien woman who'd just risked everything to protect him. And he realized something. It wasn't just that they were bonded. He wanted to be. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about choosing her back. If you've ever rooted for a love that the world said couldn't survive, If you believe that connection is stronger than fear, subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, they're just the beginning. Morning came slowly. The wind had died down, but the forest remained unnervingly quiet. Not peaceful, quiet in the way an empty battlefield feels after the chaos ends, where the snow hides more than it reveals. Connor was awake, staring at the ceiling of the cave. His body ached. His shoulder throbbed from where the shotgun's recoil had hit too hard. His hands were raw and cold, his breath still clouding in the icy air. Kaylee slept beside him, wrapped in the emergency blanket. For the first time since he met her, she looked vulnerable. Even with her tail curled around her legs and her ears twitching occasionally in sleep, she looked human, peaceful, as if the fight hadn't just happened. But Connor felt every second of it. He sat up slowly, wincing at the tightness in his chest. His shirt stuck to his skin. Blood. Not much, but enough to remind him that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He wasn't a bystander anymore. He was in this, body and soul. Kaylee stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, still golden, still not entirely of this world, and met his. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I couldn't," he replied. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "You're hurt." "I've been worse," he lied. She didn't argue. She reached out, touching his shoulder gently. Her hand was warm, but not in a normal way. It radiated something deeper, something calming. The pain dulled almost immediately. "What is that?" he asked. "Bond privilege," she said. "My energy responds to yours now. I can ease what your body fights against." Connor raised an eyebrow. "You mean you're like my living painkiller?" She smiled faintly. "Something like that." He studied her, the curve of her neck, the way her ears twitched with every forest sound, the softness of her voice despite the storm still fresh in their minds. "You saved me last night," he said. "You saved me first." "No," he shook his head. "I just gave you tea and a blanket. You took on monsters for me." She looked down. They weren't monsters, just what I used to be. That hit him harder than he expected. Kaylee wasn't running from invaders. She was running from herself. Hours passed in silence. They built a new fire using damp sticks and torn pages from the ranger's manual in Connor's pack. Kaylee dried her clothes. Connor cleaned his wounds as best he could. Around midday, Kaylee stood suddenly. "They're gone. For now." "How can you tell?" She turned slowly toward the tree line. "Because I can't feel them anymore." Connor stared at her. "You could feel them. They're part of my old pack. Their bond was deep. Even now, I sense when they're near, when they hunger, when they search." He exhaled. "So we're safe. For now. But not for long." He nodded slowly, rubbing his temples. "So what do we do? Keep running? Hide until they give up?" Kaylee shook her head. "They won't give up. Not until I'm back in their fold, or erased from existence." Connor laughed bitterly. "You've got real dramatic enemies. They see what I did as betrayal," she said. "Worse than betrayal, dilution. I chose a bond outside the species. That's never been done before." Connor looked up sharply. "Wait, never?" Kaylee nodded. "You're the first human to bond with one of us. So I'm like what? A cross-species experiment." She smirked. "More like a miracle, or a scandal, depending on who you ask." He leaned back against the cave wall, sighing. "I didn't ask for any of this, Kaylee. I know, but I don't regret it." That surprised even him. She tilted her head. "Why not?" He took a long breath. "Because I felt more alive in 3 days with you than I have in 3 years out here." Kaylee said nothing. Then, quietly, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Later, as the snow began to lighten and a pale sun broke through the clouds, Kaylee stood at the edge of the cave, tail swaying slowly. "We need to move soon." Connor stood beside her, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Where?" She pointed west, toward the mountains. "There's a place they can't follow. A fracture point. Energy lines converge there. It severs old bonds, clouds tracking senses. You saying we can disappear? Not forever, but long enough to figure out what we are now." Connor nodded slowly. "Let's go." They walked side by side through the trees. Footprints vanished behind them as more snow began to fall. Each step deeper into the wilderness, deeper into the unknown. But it wasn't fear that drove them now. It was choice. And for the first time, it felt like Connor was the one making it. He didn't know what they were walking toward, but he knew who he was walking with. And that was enough. They walked for hours. The forest around them grew quieter, but not lifeless. Snow clung to the trees like ghosts, listening in silence. Each crunch of their boots echoed like a drumbeat in the woods. Connor kept glancing sideways at Kaylee. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he still couldn't believe she was real. Even in the cold, even with blood crusted on his sleeve and exhaustion weighing him down, he felt more awake than he ever had. Kaylee wasn't speaking much, but her presence was steady, strong. She walked like she belonged to the snow, like she'd been born in it. But every few minutes, she'd glance back at him, just to make sure he was still there. By sunset, they reached a ridge overlooking a frozen lake. Kaylee stopped. "We rest here." Connor dropped the pack, his muscles groaning in protest. "God, yes." He collapsed onto a log half buried in snow and rubbed his face with gloved hands. Kaylee sat beside him, silent, scanning the treeline. The view was unreal, like something from a dream. The lake was frozen solid, reflecting the pink-orange sky, and mountains loomed in the distance like ancient sentinels. Connor let the silence sit a while before breaking it. "So, that bond thing," he said, "what does it actually mean? Beyond the glowing chest thing and telepathic whispers?" Kaylee smirked, pulling her knees to her chest. "It means we feel each other, not just emotions. Depth, shift, echoes of thought." He looked at her. "So, right now, what am I feeling?" She tilted her head, ears twitching slightly. Confused, curious, and angry. Not at me, at the world, at the way this all happened. He blinked. "Yeah, that's spot on." She nodded. "Your thoughts are heavy, but steady, like stones in a river." Connor laughed under his breath. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about my brain." Kaylee nudged him gently with her shoulder. "I like your brain. It's loud but honest." He looked at her, a slow warmth spreading in his chest despite the cold. "You keep talking like that, I might start thinking you actually like me." Kaylee didn't smile this time. "I do." They lit a small fire near the rocks. Kaylee wrapped herself in the emergency blanket again, and Connor offered her the last protein bar in the pack. She took it like it was sacred. "No one ever offered me food before," she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? What kind of people were you running with?" "Not people," she replied. "Pack. Everything was earned. Fought for. There was no giving, only proving." Connor leaned back against the rock wall. "Well, here, we share. No proving needed." She looked at him for a long time. And then, softly, she said, "I think I chose right." As night fell, they moved closer to the fire. The cold was brutal now, the kind that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. Kaylee shivered once, and Connor instinctively pulled her closer. She didn't resist. Her tail curled around them both like a blanket. Her ears flicked back slightly, a quiet sign of comfort. For a moment, it didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like home. Later, as they stared into the flames, Kaylee spoke again. "You were human before this." He looked at her. "I still am." "No," she said gently. "Something's different now." She reached out and touched the glow beneath his collarbone. The mark of their bond, faint but pulsing. "This will change you. Slowly. You'll hear things others don't. Feel things that aren't yours. Dream in ways humans don't understand." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Will it hurt?" "Not always. But yes." He nodded slowly. "And you? Will you change too?" Kaylee looked at the fire, her golden eyes reflecting it like liquid gold. "I already have." They slept curled together beneath the cliff, sharing warmth, breath, silence. No words passed between them, just the steady rhythm of two heartbeats, slowly falling in sync. And when Connor dreamed, he saw her. Not just as she was now, but as she'd once been, in a moonlit forest, surrounded by others like her, alone among many, eyes full of questions no one else dared to ask. He woke with a strange ache in his chest. Kaylee stirred beside him. "You saw it," she whispered. He nodded. "I felt it. The loneliness." She didn't say anything for a while. Then she whispered, "It was worse than death." By morning, something had shifted. They didn't speak about it, but it was there, in the way she looked at him now, in the way he walked closer, no longer second-guessing. It wasn't instinct anymore. It was trust. Not blind, not perfect, but earned. Connor realized something else too. The wilderness didn't scare him like it used to. Not because it was safer, but because he wasn't alone in it anymore. They reached the fracture point by dusk. Kaylee had described it like a scar in the earth, a place where natural energy bent and twisted, where no signal from her old world could pass through clean. It was more than that. Connor could feel at the moment they crossed into the clearing. The air got heavier, quieter, too quiet. The wind stopped. The cold stilled. It was like stepping into a cathedral carved from snow and silence. At the center stood a black spire of stone, jagged and unnatural. Kaylee moved toward it slowly, her ears twitching, tail low. "This is it," she whispered. Connor stayed back, eyes scanning the trees. "Feels like a place you come to die." Kaylee didn't respond. She placed one hand on the stone. Immediately, it shimmered, pulsing faintly with violet light. Connor stepped forward. "What's it doing?" "It's reacting to the bond," she said. "To us." Then the ground trembled. Not gently. Deep. Powerful. Final. Connor turned, heart lurching. From the tree line, the shadows emerged. A dozen this time. Not 5. Not 6. 12 ferali. And one of them, the one in front, was taller. Broader. Wrapped in thick black fur. Eyes glowing blue instead of gold. Kaylee stepped in front of Connor, her voice suddenly like a blade. "Raven." The leader stepped forward, bearing fangs. "You broke the chain," he growled. "You diluted the blood. I chose freedom. You chose weakness." Kaylee's claws extended, not as threat, but as declaration. "I chose him." That was the moment it began. Raven lunged. Kaylee met him midair, both colliding in a blur of fur, claws, and fury. Snow exploded outward from the impact. The others began to circle. Connor didn't think. He moved. He grabbed the flare gun from his belt, the last flare loaded, aimed at the sky and fired. The red burst split the dim sky open. For 1 second, everything was illuminated. The forest, the clearing, the ferali, Kaylee being thrown to the ground. "Kaylee!" he shouted, running toward her. She staggered up, bleeding from her shoulder. One of her ears was torn. Her breaths came ragged. "This is their challenge," she gasped. "They want to end the bond. Here. Now." Connor stood between her and Raven. "Then they'll have to kill me first." Raven growled, low and furious. "You are not part of the pack. I'm part of her." He raised his fists, ready for death. But Kaylee stepped beside him again. "You can't fight them," she whispered. "Then run. I won't leave you." He looked into her eyes. "Then we do this together." The ferali charged. Time bent. Connor barely saw Kaylee move. She became pure motion. Claws. Teeth. Grace and rage. He tried to help, threw rocks, tackled one of the smaller ones, used the emergency knife on another. It wasn't enough. Raven caught him with a backhanded swipe, claws tearing across Connor's chest. He flew back, landing hard against the spire. Pain shot through his ribs. Blood spilled into the snow. Kaylee screamed. She lunged, her form shifting midair. Not fully wolf, not fully woman, something beyond both. Her roar echoed through the clearing like thunder cracking mountains. She collided with Raven in a burst of silver light. They fought like titans. Connor tried to rise. His body refused. The cold crept into him, slower now, heavier. He watched as Kaylee was slammed into the spire. Watched as Raven raised his claws for the final blow. And then Connor did something he didn't understand. He reached out, not physically, with the bond. He called her name, not with his voice, but with his soul. "Kaylee." Everything stopped. The world blinked white. A wave of light erupted from Kaylee's chest. Not fire, not heat, resonance. It slammed into Raven, throwing him backward like a puppet on a string. The other, ferali, shrieked, covering their ears, falling to their knees. The bond, the one they mocked, rejected, was no longer just a link between two. It was a shield, a weapon, a declaration. Kaylee stood slowly, eyes glowing white gold now, blood streaming from her side, one leg trembling. She looked at Raven, now crawling through the snow. "This ends here." He spat blood. "You'll never be one of them." "I never was." She turned to Connor, his eyes fluttering, breath short, and she ran to him, fell to her knees beside him, hands glowing as she pressed them to his chest. "Connor, stay with me. Please." He smiled weakly. I'm not going anywhere. You're losing too much blood. Guess that makes us even. She let out a shaky laugh, then leaned close, forehead touching his. I need you to hold on. We're not done. He nodded faintly. I know. Then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, the stars had changed. The clearing was still, silent. Kaylee sat beside him, bruised, bloodied, but alive. The ferali were gone. The spire no longer pulsed. You scared me, she whispered. He sat up slowly. You're glowing. So are you. He looked down. The mark on his chest was now brighter. Permanent. Not just burned into skin, but into being. They'll come back, he said. Yes. But next time we'll be ready. He took her hand. No. Next time we finish this. The snow had stopped. It was the first thing Connor noticed when he opened his eyes again. The world around him was still. The sky was a deep cobalt blue, stars scattered like diamonds, and the forest no longer groaned or howled. The storm was gone. So were the ferali. Kaylee sat beside him, cross-legged, sharpening a small blade with a stone. Her jacket was torn, her hair matted with dried blood, but her eyes were clear, focused. When she noticed him stirring, she dropped the blade. Connor. He winced as he sat up. His ribs screamed. His chest was bandaged with strips of fabric torn from their packs. You stayed. Of course. He gave her a half smile. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. That strange, intimate gesture she always did when words felt too small. We made it, she whispered. He nodded, eyes heavy. For now. They stayed in the fracture zone for 3 more days. The stone spire no longer glowed, but something in the air had shifted permanently. Birds began to return. The wind sounded like itself again. Connor could even smell pine. They built a temporary shelter using broken branches and thermal blankets. Kaylee hunted rabbits with terrifying precision. Connor learned how to move more quietly, how to sense when Kaylee was near, even before he saw her. Their bond had changed. Not stronger, just clearer. They didn't need to speak as much now. A glance said enough. Pain translated silently. So did comfort. One night, as they sat by a fire, Kaylee asked, "What will you do when we leave this place?" Connor looked at the flames. "I don't know. Will you go back?" He thought about the ranger station, the cabin, the isolation he used to crave. It all felt so far away now, like a different lifetime. "I don't think there's a back anymore." Kaylee nodded slowly. "Good, because I don't want to go back either." They looked at each other, and for the first time, it felt like forward was an option. On the 5th day, they buried the flare gun. It had saved them once, but it was done now. Symbolic or not, it felt like closing a chapter. Kaylee pressed her hand to the mound of snow. "No more warnings," she said. "Next time, we fight from the start." Connor gave a short laugh. "You sure know how to cheer a guy up." She grinned, fangs just barely showing. "I'm adapting." He stared at her for a moment. This alien woman who fought off her own kind for him, who ran not because she was weak, but because she wanted to be free. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you, I thought you were a hallucination, like a wolf spirit or something." Kaylee tilted her head. "I kind of am." They decided to head south, toward warmer terrain, less snow, more options. They traveled mostly at night, when Kaylee felt safest. Along the way, they encountered no one. Not humans, not ferali, just silence. But it wasn't the same silence Connor had known before. This one wasn't empty. It was earned. One morning, while resting near a frozen creek, Kaylee broke the silence. "Connor, yeah. If I had never found you, if I hadn't asked to sleep beside you that night, where would you be right now?" He thought for a long time, probably still in that cabin, pretending I liked being alone. She nodded. "You weren't running like I was. But you were hiding too." He looked at her. "Not anymore." She smiled. "Me neither." The final sign of healing came without warning. Connor awoke one night to the sound of her humming. Not words, not language, just a melody. Low, wild, ancient. When she noticed him watching, she paused. "It's a morning song," she said. "For who?" "For what I was." Connor reached out, took her hand. "You're not that anymore." "No, I'm more now. Because of you." They reached a ridgeline overlooking a deep valley. Forest below, with rivers threading through it like veins of silver. The sun rose slow and golden. Kaylee stepped to the edge. "This is where we start." Connor joined her, breath caught in his chest. And what are we now? She looked at him. We're not pack. We're not prey. We're not running. Then she said something he'd never heard her say before. We're free. Days passed, not in a blur, but with a new kind of clarity. Each morning felt earned, each step deliberate. The world didn't feel as hostile now, not because it had changed, but because they had. Kaylee no longer flinched at every sound in the trees. Connor no longer waited for the snow to bury him. They had found a rhythm, not perfect, not easy, but real. They were no longer running. They were living. One morning, as frost coated the grass in glassy crystals, Connor stood near a small creek, watching the water carve slow paths through ice. Kaylee approached quietly, as she always did. She still moved like a creature of the wild, but there was something softer now in her steps when she came near him. I used to think solitude made me stronger, he said, not turning. Kaylee stood beside him, silent. It felt like control, he continued. Like if I didn't let anyone in, I couldn't be broken again. He looked down at his reflection, the scar on his chest glowing faintly under his shirt. A reminder, but I was already broken. I just didn't want to admit it. Kaylee reached out and took his hand. Her claws were dull now, blunted. She didn't need them with him. I was bred to conquer, she said, to lead, to dominate. But I was never taught how to listen, or trust, or hope. Connor squeezed her hand gently. We're both learning. They stood there a while. No need to fill the silence. The world spoke in wind and birdsong and distant, rustling leaves. Later, they built a small cairn from stones by the riverbed. No names, no markings, just a memory. What's it for? Kaylee asked, head tilted. For the people we used to be, Connor said. She nodded once, then added her own stone to the top. I hope they're proud of us, she whispered. They would be, he replied. Even if they didn't always say it, both knew. They were no longer fugitives, no longer fragments. They were whole. That night, Connor dreamed again. But this time, the dream wasn't haunted. He stood in a forest of silver trees, under stars that shimmered like slow-falling snow. Kaylee stood beside him, not as a stranger, not as a wolf, but something in between, complete. She spoke a single word in a language he didn't know, but he understood it anyway. Home. He woke with a slow inhale. Kaylee curled against him, their bodies warm beneath layers of blankets and furs. The fire had burned low. The stars outside still blinked, ancient and indifferent. But for once, Connor didn't feel small beneath them. He felt part of something, not something cosmic or mystical, just a bond, a real one. The next day, Kaylee stood at the edge of a small cliff, staring at the horizon. Mountains rolled in the distance, layered in blue and mist. Below, rivers moved like glass veins through endless forest. Connor came up behind her. What do you see? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, I see choices, and a life that we build, not one we run from. He nodded, his hand brushing hers. And do you still feel them? The ferali. Kaylee's eyes narrowed slightly. No, they're gone for now. Maybe watching. But they won't risk this place again. Not after what we did. Connor looked at her, at the way her white hair caught the wind, at the way her scarred shoulder was bare and unashamed. And you, he asked, do you still feel like one of them? Kaylee turned. No, I feel like me. And I've never said that before. They walked back to their shelter in silence. The forest now familiar. Not tame, but known. Something about surviving together had made the wilderness feel less like a threat and more like a mirror. It reflected their rawness, their fear, their strength. It didn't demand perfection, just honesty. And finally, they could give it. As they lay under the stars that night, Connor whispered, do you think this will last? Kaylee didn't hesitate. Yes, because for the first time, we're not just surviving, we're choosing. 6 months later, spring arrived late in the north. The snow had receded into the tree lines, leaving patches of green fighting to grow beneath melting ice. Birds were returning. The rivers moved freely again, and high above the ridge, smoke curled gently from the chimney of a newly built cabin. Connor stood outside, chopping firewood, shirt off, scar visible, muscles tense from the swing. He looked stronger, more grounded, but the wildness in his eyes hadn't faded. It had simply found a purpose. Kaylee stepped out of the cabin, holding 2 mugs of tea. She wore a sweater 3 sizes too big, her tail swaying lazily behind her, her silver hair braided back. "You're overworking again," she called. He grinned. "Only because you drink all the hot water." She handed him a mug. Their fingers brushed. A spark, not literal, but alive, still passed between them when they touched. They drank in silence for a moment, watching the morning mist rise. "This is starting to feel like a real home," Connor said. "It is one," Kaylee replied. She looked toward the forest edge, still alert, but without fear. "No signs of them?" he asked. "None. They've gone quiet. For now." He nodded. "But even if they come back," she added, "we're not who we used to be." Connor sipped his tea. "No, we're not." Inside the cabin, it was warm, lived in. A mix of human survival gear and alien touches. Crystals embedded in the wood beams, soft light pulsing from the corners instead of electric bulbs, a pelt from Kaylee's world draped over the couch. On the wall, above the fireplace, hung a simple carving, two intertwined marks, hers and his, a symbol of the bond. Not sacred, not ritual, just true. That night, they sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, stars scattered above like they had the first night she arrived. Connor leaned back, letting the quiet settle into his bones. Kaylee rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you miss your old life?" she asked. He thought about it. The silence of the cabin, the pain he used to carry, the walls he built to keep the world out. "No," he said. "I only miss the part of me that hadn't met you yet." She smiled softly, golden eyes gleaming. "In you?" he asked. "Do you ever miss your world?" She paused, then answered honestly. "I miss what could have been, but not what it became." Connor took her hand, thumb tracing the curve of her palm. "We'll build something better here." Kaylee looked up at the sky. "We already are." As dawn crept over the trees, painting the world in gold, Connor whispered, "Whatever comes next, I'm ready." Kaylee replied without hesitation. "So am I." They didn't need to say anything more, because this was never just about survival. It was about choosing to love, even when the universe tried to tear you apart. If this story moved you, if you've ever believed in a connection that defies everything, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us what you felt. Because stories like this aren't just fiction, they're a reminder that love, even across worlds, is always worth fighting for.